Okay, so now moving on. 1 Kings chapter 15, starting in verse 9. In the 20th year of Jeroboam, king of Israel, Asa became king of Judah. So Jeroboam was still king, although not for much longer. And he reigned in Jerusalem 41 years. His mother's, that's the longest reigning king to date so far. His mother's name was Maacah, daughter of Abijah. So he's another descendant of Absalom. So Absalom gets two descendants on the throne at some point in time. Asa did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. So just because he comes from Absalom doesn't mean that Asa has to be a bad guy. Okay, that doesn't factor into it. You can have a messed up apostate grandfather, or who turned away from God and rebelled against the Lord's anointed at the time, David. And that doesn't mean that you have to be that way. It doesn't mean that you have to be a bad guy too. Asa did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, as his father David had done. He expelled the male shrine prostitutes from the land. Now, we don't really know exactly what this is. The term we see here in our English Bibles is male shrine prostitutes. It was something to do probably with ordained sex. It's something to do with a consecrated part of a worship system that was sanctioned by the priest at the time when it was not supposed to be. And comparing it to other practices in the nations around them, it was probably licensed ordained sex. He expelled the male shrine prostitutes from the land and got rid of all the idols his fathers had made. He even deposed his grandmother Maacah from her position as queen mother, because she had made a repulsive Asherah pole. Now, the queen mother position was pretty much the highest position a woman could get in this day and time, in this culture. Simply being the wife of the king is not the highest position a woman could have, because the king could have multiple wives. Being his favorite wife wasn't even the most honored, powerful position, because again, he could have multiple wives, and he could have sons from multiple women. The way you became the most powerful woman in the land in this day and time was to be the mother of the current king. So in this case, Maacah is the most powerful woman in Israel, or in Judah, because she's either the mother or the grandmother of the current king. That's the top position for women in this day and time. I don't know exactly what authority she had. Apparently, she had a pretty good amount of authority. He had to depose her. And the text kind of makes it seem like this is a pretty significant thing for him to do. So apparently, Maacah had, and she was apparently also the mother of the previous king. I'm not really sure. So, or the grandmother. So, daughter of Absalom, So this guy, he's going to some effort to get rid of this woman, so she must have been pretty well entrenched by this time. So he even deposed his grandmother Maacah from her position as queen mother, because she had made a repulsive Asherah pole. Asa cut the pole down and burned it in the Kidron Valley. Although he did not remove the high places, Asa's heart was fully committed to the Lord. Also, that means he was not an idolater. Now, so we have to understand what these high places are. And this is another one of those things where the text is assuming that we know this, and we really don't, because we don't live in that culture. Again, the writers of the book are assuming that their readers, their hearers, I should say, because no one's reading this, they're hearing it, know what the high places are without having to be explained. Remember how way back in the days of Moses, they talked about designing these priest clothes, the ephod and the tunic and all that, and they were supposed to have these special pockets in them for these things called the Urim and the Thummim, okay? And the text doesn't even explain it never does explain that. Nowhere in the Old Testament does it ever explain what the Urim and the Thummim were. They think that you know it. The text assumes that you know, because the people that would have been hearing it for the first time did know. The Israelites that Moses was reading this out loud to in the desert, in the wilderness, and the generations following, didn't know what the Urim and the Thummim were, so they didn't have to have that explained. Same thing kind of here. The writers of the books of Kings assume that the people hearing this text know what the high places were, So they don't really explain what they were. From what I can tell, from what I can gather, they were apparently hilltop shrines. Again, there is an idea in this day and time, in this culture of the world, this part is just ubiquitous. I mean, just literally everywhere in the world, actually, just ubiquitous, that to get to God, you had to go up as high as possible. He was up there in the sky or beyond the sky somewhere, and to get there, you had to climb a mountain or build a hill in the shape of a mountain, a ziggurat temple or a pyramid. You build a shrine in the shape of a mountain, and get as high as you possibly could to go to get to God. That was the whole point of the Tower of Babel. That was the idea of Jacob's dream of the ladder, the staircase leading to heaven above him, literally the steps of a temple leading up above him. It was just constant everywhere. I mean, go everywhere in the world, this idea that God or the gods were up somewhere. They're above us somehow. To get the higher you got, the closer you got to them. So there are hilltop shrines, apparently. And the good kings, for the most part, are going to leave some of them alone. And they're not going to be chastised for that too much. Like here, for example. It does say that he expelled the land, the male shrine prostitutes in the land, got rid of all the idols and all that, and burned the Asherah pole. And he says he was committed to the Lord all his life, but he didn't remove the high places. Well, apparently, the high places he didn't remove, these hilltop shrines he didn't remove, were shrines devoted to Yahweh. They were not supposed to be there. They were illegal, because everything was supposed to be done at the temple these days. And again, this is a logistical problem. I mean, in order to do proper worship, you had to be in one place. You had to go to the temple in Jerusalem to do that. And if you didn't live in Jerusalem, if you happened to be anywhere else, you'd have to physically go there, which may or may not have always been easy or convenient or whatever. So they would have like these hilltop shrines in their territories or in their fields or wherever, and they would just do it there. And they kind of never really did give that up. That was going to be an issue kind of for, but they don't seem to have been, there doesn't seem to have, it was worse to have a shrine devoted to another god, a Baal or an Asherah or something like that. The high places that get left alone typically seem to be high places that were devoted to Yahweh, and that doesn't seem to have been too big of a problem. At any rate, I think that's what that means. So he did not remove the high places, the hilltop shrines that were devoted to Yahweh. But because even though that, despite that, his heart was fully committed to the Lord, so he was not an idolater. He did not turn around and follow other gods. He brought into the temple of the Lord the silver and gold and the articles that he and his father had dedicated. There was war between Asa and Baasha, king of Israel. We'll read about him in a bit. Throughout their reigns, Baasha, king of Israel, went up against Judah and fortified Ramah to prevent anyone, that's a town in the south of Israel, near Judah, to prevent anyone from leaving or entering the territory of Asa, king of Judah. This is going to be a continuous problem for Judah throughout the period of the split kingdom, because Israel was north of Judah and was more directly on the international highways leading around at this time. Invaders into the kingdom typically, unless they came from Egypt, which was to the south, typically came from the north, because east of Israel and Judah, of course, is the Jordan River, and east of that is a desert. So when invaders from Assyria or Babylon, of course Syria and Damascus are north of Israel already. So when invaders from the north or east would come to Israel, they would come down to the north. So they would go through Israel first. This meant that Judah was more protected, generally speaking. But it also meant that the trade routes kind of bypassed Judah. And so Baasha here is building a city to prevent traders and merchants from even going to Judah. Asa then took all the silver and gold that was left in the treasuries of the Lord's temple and of his own palace. He entrusted it to his officials and sent them to Ben-Hadad, son of Tabramon, the son of Hezion, the king of Aram, who was ruling in Damascus. We're going to be reading a lot about these Ben-Hadads. That's a king title, Ben-Hadad. It basically means son of Hadad, or whatever Hadad stands for, some god of Damascus at that time. We're going to be reading about a lot of guys named Ben-Hadad or Hadadezer or something along those lines who are going to be kings of Damascus. We're reading a lot about these guys. They're going to be around for about 100 years as a major part of the story. Eventually, Assyria is going to capture them, but that's 100 plus years from now. Let there be a treaty between me and you, he said, as there was between my father and your father. See, I am sending you a gift of silver and gold. Now, break your treaty with Baasha, king of Israel, so that he will withdraw from me. So he's buying him off, basically. Apparently, he's appealing to some historical partnership between them that he thinks is, worthy precedent to follow, and he's buying him off. He's not asking him to go attack Baasha, king of Israel. He's just saying, stop attacking me. Ben-Hadad agreed with King Asa and sent the commanders of his forces against the towns of Israel. Now, Asa didn't actually ask him to do that, but he's going to do it anyway. He conquered Ijon, Dan, Abel-Beth-Maachah, and all Kinnereth, in addition to Naphtali. When Baasha heard this, he stopped building Ramah and withdrew to Tirzah. Then King Asa issued an order to all Judah. No one was exempt, and they carried away from Ramah the stones and timber Baasha had been using there. With them, King Asa built up Geba in Benjamin, and also Mizpah. As for all the other events of King Asa's reign, all his achievements, all he did, and the cities he built, and he would have done a lot, because he reigned 41 years. He has the longest reign of any king so far, so it would have been quite a bit. Are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? I guess. I don't know. I guess they are. I don't know where that book is. I'd like to read it, but we don't have it anymore. In his old age, however, his feet became diseased. Then Asa rested with his fathers, and was buried with them in the city of his father David. And Jehoshaphat his son succeeded him as king. All right, let's read about Asa according to the Chronicler's account of him. Once again, we get more information here than we did in the book of Kings. Chronicles is not talking about the kings of the north. We're not really following the kings of the north at all. So we have, because we're not spending really any time talking about them, we have a little bit more time to talk about the kings of the south more fully. In some cases, at least. Let's start with chapter 14, verse 1. Abijah rested with his fathers and was buried in the city of David. Asa his son succeeded him as king, and in his days the country was at peace for 10 years. I'm not sure who the his is supposed to be here, Asa or Abijah, I'm not sure. Abijah didn't even reign for 10 years, he reigned for 3, so that could be speaking of a co-regency with Rehoboam, maybe with Asa, but I'm not entirely clear who the his is here, of whose days this was. Anyway, moving on. Asa did what was good and right in the eyes of the Lord his God. He removed the foreign altars and the high places. So here we are specifically saying he's removing the high places. In context within the foreign altars, so he's removing the high places that were devoted to gods that were not Yahweh. Smashed the sacred stones and cut down the Asherah poles. He commanded Judah to seek the Lord, the God of their fathers, and to obey his laws and commands. He removed the high places and incense altars in every town in Judah, and the kingdom was at peace under him. He built up the fortified cities of Judah, since the land was at peace. No one was at war with him during those years, for the Lord gave him rest. Let us build up these towns, he said to Judah, and put walls around them with towers, gates, and bars. The land is still ours, because we have sought the Lord our God. We sought him, and he has given us rest on every side. So they built and prospered. So God is still interested in blessing these people. There's been a lot that's happened now. They have rebelled against him. They have asked for a king against his wishes. They have rebelled against those kings. They have split the nation into two, but God is still interested in blessing them and still interested in fulfilling his promises to them. Asa had an army of 300,000 men from Judah, equipped with large shields and with spears, and 280,000 men from Benjamin, armed with small shields and with bows. All these were brave fighting men. So the Benjamites are loyal to Judah. Zerah, they were not at first. The Benjamites and the Judahites were mortal enemies for a while there, but the Benjamites are now very loyal to Judah. Zerah the Cushite marched out against them with a vast army. This is Ethiopia here. And 300,000 chariots. By the way, that footnote there says, an army of 1,000 thousands, or with an army of thousands upon thousands, a vast army. So they had a big army, but Zerah the Cushite had an even bigger army. The Israelites are always outnumbered. They never have these strength in numbers, ever. As big as their armies are, the opposing armies are always bigger than theirs, always. And it came as far as Mareshah. Asa went out to meet him, and they took up battle positions in the valley of Zephathah near Mareshah. Then Asa called to the Lord his God and said, Lord, there is no one like you to help the powerless, us in other words, against the mighty, and them, our enemies. Help us, O Lord our God, for we rely on you, and in your name we have come against a vast army. O Lord, you are our God. Do not let man prevail against you. The Lord struck down the Cushites before Asa and Judah. The Cushites fled, and Asa and his army pursued them as far as Gerar. Such a great number of Cushites fell that they could not recover. They were crushed before the Lord and his forces. The men of Judah carried off a large amount of plunder. They destroyed all the villages around Gerar, for the terror of the Lord had fallen upon them. We haven't seen that in a while. Remember that whole idea that God promised them about the blessing and the blessings and the covenant of blessings and cursings? This is Deuteronomy 28. Deuteronomy 28:7. As he's giving the list of blessings for obedience, the Lord will grant that the enemies who rise up against you will be defeated before you. They will come at you from one direction, but will flee from you in 7. He says the same thing at the end of Leviticus. Leviticus 26, starting in verse 6. I will grant peace in the land, and you will lie down, and no one will make you afraid. I will remove savage beasts from the land, and the sword will not pass through your country. You will pursue your enemies, and they will fall by the sword before you. 5 of you will chase 100, and 100 of you will chase 10,000, and your enemies will fall by the sword before you. So we're seeing that happen here. Haven't seen that happen too much lately, but we're seeing that happen here. They destroyed all the villagers around Gerar, for the terror of the Lord had fallen upon them. They plundered all these villages, since there was much booty there. They also attacked the camps of the herdsmen, and carried off droves of sheep and goats and camels. Then they returned to Jerusalem. I don't know if they were supposed to do that or not, but they did. Then they returned to Jerusalem. Now that is all a setup for the next chapter. We didn't read about that in Kings. We read about that in Chronicles because we're going to have a contrast between this and the war with Baasha that we already read about in Kings. The reason why the Chronicler is including this example of a faithful battle for Asa is because he wants to highlight the contrast between this and his response to Baasha's attack on him later on in time. The Spirit of God came upon Azariah, son of Obed. He went out to meet Asa and said to him, Listen to me, Asa and all Judah and Benjamin. The Lord is with you when you are with him. If you seek him, he will be found by you. But if you forsake him, he will forsake you. For a long time, Israel was without the true God. I'm assuming he's talking about since the end of Solomon's reign until now. Without a priest to teach and without the law. But in their distress, they turned to the Lord, the God of Israel, and sought him, and he was found by them. In those days, it was not safe to travel about, for all the inhabitants of the lands were in great turmoil. One nation was being crushed by another, and one city by another. because God was troubling them with every kind of distress. But as for you, be strong, and do not give up, for your work will be rewarded. When Asa heard these words and the prophecy of Azariah, son of Oded the prophet, he took courage. He removed the detestable idols from the whole land of Judah and Benjamin, and from the towns he had captured in the hills of Ephraim. That's actually Israel's territory, but he's captured some of that now. He repaired the altar of the Lord that was in front of the portico of the Lord's temple. I guess it was damaged. I'm not sure what that means exactly. I mean, it's getting to be about 100 years old by now. Solomon's getting to be, Solomon's reign started in 970. Now we're down around 900 or so BC. So that's getting to be a while now. Then he assembled all Judah and Benjamin, and the people from Ephraim, Manasseh, and Simeon, who had settled among them. For large numbers had come over to him from Israel when they saw that the Lord his God was with him. One thing that we're going to see happen, and we've already mentioned it, and we're going to see it continuing to happen, we see it happen here, and it's going to continue to happen, is that the better people, the more faithful people of the north, are going to continue migrating south. Part of the reason why we have this split in the kingdom is to give an escape valve to those in the north who want to go to the south, where the worship of God is still being conducted, at least to some degree. So the more faithful ones in the north have a way to go to the south to continue worshiping Jehovah properly. And we are seeing that. We saw that back early from the very beginning when Jeroboam set up his system in the first place. Some people left, and some people are still leaving. They assembled at Jerusalem in the 3rd month of the 15th year of Asa's reign. At that time they sacrificed to the Lord 700 head of cattle and 7,000 sheep and goats from the plunder they had brought back. They entered into a covenant to seek the Lord, the God of their fathers, with all their heart and soul. All who would not seek the Lord, the God of Israel, were to be put to death, whether small or great, man or woman. They took an oath to the Lord with loud acclamation, with shouting, with trumpets, and with horns. All Judah rejoiced about the oath, because they had sworn it wholeheartedly. They sought God eagerly, and he was found by them. So the Lord gave them rest on every side. King Asa also deposed his grandmother Maacah from her position as queen mother, because she had made a repulsive Asherah pole. Asa cut the pole down, broke it up, and burned it in the Kidron Valley. Although he did not remove the high places in Israel. Now, earlier on it said he did. In chapter 14, verse 5, it says he removed the high places and incense altars. Clearly, those high places were the ones to other gods, to foreign gods. The ones he kept were the ones that were dedicated to Jehovah God. So although he did not remove those high places from Israel, Asa's heart was fully committed to the Lord all his life. He brought into the temple of God the silver and gold and the articles that he and his father had dedicated. There was no more war until the 35th year of Asa's reign. In the 36th year of Asa's reign, Baasha, king of Israel, went up against Judah and fortified Ramah to prevent anyone from leaving or entering the territory of Asa, king of Judah. Now, we didn't get the timeline for that in the King's account. It doesn't say exactly when that happened, it just says that it did. And so Chronicles gives us some of the details of the time and in the setting, the context. It tells us when in Asa's reign this happened. It also tells us some stuff that happened before that in Asa's reign to help set up the context for this. So Asa's getting pretty old now. He's near the end. He's going to reign 41 years. This is 36 years, so he's almost done. His best days are behind him. His healthiest, youngest days are behind him. And now he hasn't had a battle in 20 years. And now he's got another problem on his hands, an enemy from the north this time. Asa then took the silver and gold out of the treasuries of the Lord's temple and of his own palace, and sent it to Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, who was ruling in Damascus. Let there be a treaty between me and you, he said, as there was between my father and your father. See, I am sending you silver and gold. Now break your treaty with Baasha, king of Israel, so that he will withdraw from me. Ben-Hadad agreed with King Asa, and sent the commanders of his forces against the towns of Israel. They conquered Ijon, Dan, Abel, Maim, and all the store cities of Naphtali. When Baasha heard this, he stopped building Ramah and abandoned his work. Then King Asa brought all the men of Judah, and they carried away from Ramah the stones and timber Baasha had been using. So he just left it there. He just left it all there in a heap. With them, I'm guessing he's going to go fight Ben-Hadad, I guess. With them, he built up Geba and Mizpah. At that time, so we read about that in Kings, but now we're going to read something that we didn't read in Kings. The chronicler has more to say about this. At that time, Hanani the seer came to Asa, king of Judah, and said to him, "Because you relied on the king of Aram, and not on the Lord your God, the army of the king of Aram has escaped from your hand. Were not the Cushites and Libyans a mighty army with great numbers of chariots and horsemen? Yet when you relied on the Lord, he delivered them into your hand. For the eyes of the Lord range throughout the earth to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to him." Doesn't matter if they're Israelites or not. His eyes roam over all the earth to find anyone whose heart is committed to him. So the reason why I read about that story back in chapter 14 was to set up the contrast with this one here in 16, which is also recorded in Kings. But the chronicler had more he wanted to say about that than the writer of Kings did. "You have done a foolish thing, and from now on you will be at war." There had been 20 years without a battle. Asa was now 20 years older, and apparently he just wasn't quite as willing to go out and fight as he was when he was 20 years younger. Asa was angry with the seer because of this. He was so enraged that he put him in prison. At the same time, Asa brutally oppressed some of the people. Even some of the good ones can go loopy at the end, huh? The events of Asa's reign from beginning to end are written in the book of the Kings of Judah and Israel. In the 39th year of his reign, so near the very end, the last couple of years of his life, Asa was afflicted with a disease in his feet. I'm assuming this is a punishment for his actions toward the prophet and some of the people. It doesn't actually say that, but I'm assuming it is. I don't know. Though his disease was severe, even in his illness he did not seek help from the Lord, but only from the physicians. Then, in the 41st year of his reign, Asa died and rested with his fathers. They buried him in the tomb that he had cut out for himself in the city of David. They laid him on a bier covered with spices and various blended perfumes, and they made a huge fire in his honor. So Asa stumbled there at the end, but they still gave him a very honorable burial and funeral procession. My guess is that he is given an overall very positive assessment by both the Kings and Chronicles writers. So my guess is that he never became an idolater, even when he made mistakes at the end of his life. It seems to me like when Baasha, king of Israel, turned against him near the end of his reign, he had probably gotten to the point where he had been at peace long enough and he had gotten old enough and he didn't want to go out and do any more fighting. So he figured out a different way to achieve peace without consulting God. Then he got called out for it by a prophet and probably got mad. And so he jailed the prophet, oppressed some of the other people who were probably calling him out for the same thing. God then probably gave him the disease in his feet, and he kind of apparently got mad about that, didn't consult God for help, and then died. I don't think he turned to idols during this time, but he had an attitude problem in his final days, it seems. That can happen very easily.